Testimony today was Monroe County Executive Maggie Brooks. She's joining us in the studio tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So your argument basically is that Medicaid is the largest unfunded or semi-funded mandate, if you will, for counties.
Absolutely.
That's right?
Absolutely. In Monroe County, 82% of our budget is mandated expense, and 45% of that is Medicaid. And it grows. It grows every year. And even though we've capped the local share of Medicaid at the county level, it still grows every year. It's a program that's not sustainable.
Well, the cap actually came during the Bataki era, if I'm not mistaken.
It did. And I think the intention was to cap with eventual takeover. And I don't think there's a county executive in this state who doesn't believe that ultimately that needs to be the long-term goal. The state has to assume responsibility for this massive health care program. I believe that, you know, the responsibility and the funding of a program needs to reside with the level of government that has the decision-making authority.
Well, but in this case,
it's Medicaid.
Doesn't the federal government also have, to some degree, a decision-making authority also? I mean,
they do. And I think it does need to be a relationship between the state and the federal government. We're one of the few states where counties are at the table.
Right.
Counties are actually contributing money to support this program. And I think that model is broken, and we need to change it.
So in your perfect world, the counties are completely out of the healthcare business, period. No more responsibility at all.
At least funding. I mean, we may be a partner in service delivery, but the funding needs to reside at the state level. The state's talking about an initial step, takeover of the administrative portion
right.
of the Medicaid program. We support that. I have 120 people in Monroe County that are dedicated to the administration of the program, making decisions about eligibility, income levels. They're doing federal and state audits. You know, it's really, really very difficult for counties to be part of this program. I could free up a lot of resources if the state would start with the administrative branch. And to me, that's a good first step, because suddenly the state becomes engaged in some of those decisions that need to be made.
The Medicaid Task Force report on recommendations to cut in $2.3 billion, or reform and cut, or tax and cut, depending on who you talk to, out of this system. I mean, do you believe that it will, in fact, help assuage some of the problems that the counties are having?
Well, you know, the devil's in the details, and I'm not sure we have a clear answer to that. The only thing that really helps counties is a cut to the program, is a reduction in the size of the program. It's not sustainable. Even for the state, if the state's paying the entire freight, it's still not sustainable. And I think at some point we need to get to that decision-making opportunity of how do we reduce the size of Medicaid. I've been on 3 state panels. I was on the Federal Medicaid Commission for 15 months. You know, you've got to look at the scope of the program. It's become a universal health care program in New York State. Here in New York, we provide 32 options under Medicaid that are not mandated by the federal government. You know, how do you sustain that level of commitment to a program and then pay for anything else?
So you don't believe, I mean, one of the things that they're going to do is put everyone into managed care, and the argument that's been made by Jason Helgerson, who's sort of the Medicaid chief and also the health commissioner, is this is going to help keep down costs, because people who are high needs, who end up in the hospital a lot, are not going to be there as much.
Right.
Is that not sufficient to at least reduce some of the costs?
Well, I think there needs to be a balance. And I believe that Medicaid was created in the 1960s to serve certain populations. And I don't think we can forget what the original mission of Medicaid was. And certainly we don't. What's happened over time, though, is that anyone that is uninsured, anyone that is underinsured has been medicated. And so it has become a universal health care program. We have to introduce other options to help people find health insurance in the state, and not just automatically turn to Medicaid. Medicaid is the reason that our property taxes are 79% above the national average. And if we really want to talk about property taxes, and I think, you know, the underlying theme in all of these conversations is how do we protect taxpayers in New York State? Well, when it comes to Medicaid, the only way you can protect them is to ease that burden by reducing the size and the impact of the program.
Okay, but when we talk about that, right, when you say reducing the size and impact, I mean, really that means is fewer people receiving fewer services. I mean, that's the reality,
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm a big believer you can improve outcomes and improve results and improve service. and reduce costs at the same time. I think you can balance the program. I don't think everybody who's in Medicaid needs to be in Medicaid. There are certainly options that we provide that we don't need to provide. Giving counties more control over the decisions at the local level is certainly beneficial. In Monroe County, there may be components that I don't need. My demographic, my constituents don't need that service. Well, let me, as a county official, make some of those decisions closer to home.
But none of this is happening, and under what the Medicaid team has actually recommended, right? I mean, similarly, what we saw in the Medicaid hearings was a frustration level on the part of some of the state lawmakers. I'm thinking particularly of Kemp Hannon, who is the chair of the Health Committee, about the lack of detail, lack of detail in this report. And that was something that people were criticizing. There's a hole in the budget, there's a hole in the budget. Then the report came out and the governor said, the hole has been filled, so stop your complaining, right? But now there is a lack of detail in terms of how exactly this is going to work, and that has been actually a refrain that we're hearing frequently also in the mandate relief report, and you served on that team too.
I did, and it's disappointing because I don't think either report has gone far enough. There's no relief in any of those proposals. That's what people are looking for. They're looking for proposals that are going to relieve the burden as taxpayers that they see each and every day with these enormous programs that we have to subsidize. That's what we have to get to. Where is the relief in both of these reports? I think what's going to happen with Medicaid in particular is that the conversation's going to change when there's a property tax cap enacted in Albany, because suddenly...
Wait, you mean that you think that there will be one?
I do think that there will be. I think the governor's committed. I think the Senate has passed its own version, which, to be honest, I don't think is workable in its current form. I think the Assembly is committed to some form of legislation, and what's going to happen is at the very local level, the county executives are going to get blamed when things don't get right, but we're going to be making decisions about what we're going to pay for under that cap and what gets squeezed out. That's when you're going to see a lot of emotion come to the table, because when I can't pay for parks, when I can't fix the roads, when I can't pay for public safety in my county, taxpayers are going to be upset. But you see a lot of emotion now at the Capitol about cutting health care programs and Medicaid programs. It's going to multiply tenfold when you start taking away basic quality of life services, because everything doesn't fit under the cap.
But won't they blame you? I mean,
absolutely they will.
In other words, they won't blame the state as much as the rubber hits the road with you. That hits the road with the mayors, and it hits the road with the counties, depending on who you are. A mayor, a village council person, a supervisor, a county executive. Not everyone has the same local government structure in New York. But you'll bear the blame for what the state has done, and that's exactly what happens with unfunded mandates. They say, well, okay, county executive, I don't like my property taxes, I want my park open, etc., and you're going to take the blame.
That is the biggest concern that we have as county executives, that Albany's going to pass a property tax cap and say, you know what, we promised during our campaigns last year that we would do this. Now we've done it. And all the pressure is going to come back to the local level. That's why I'm here testifying, submitting testimony to the Medicaid group. That's why I was thrilled to be part of the mandate relief team, even though I'm not happy with the process and the way the report played out. I still think we have to be optimistic that that this governor, and I will give him credit, this governor has shined a spotlight on Medicaid reform and mandate reform in the first 100 days of his administration. We may not like where we are at this moment in time, but people are talking about it. So I'm a glass half full person, and I have to believe that talk will lead to action. But we're getting tired of just talking. We've been talking for a long time in this state. If you go back 20 years, we were talking about Medicaid. There is going to come a point in time when we have to take action. We have to shrink the size of the program, and not everybody's going to like what that looks like. But at the end of the day, I think we can improve the results in the program and the quality of the program by making it a smaller model.
You're a Republican, is that correct? Okay. The Senate Republicans passed this property tax cap bill, just to get back to that for a second. It wasn't, you think that it's flawed, that bill?
I think there are some questions about whether it really works. And again, the devil's in the details, and I want to make sure I understand it fully. But the way it reads, I don't think it would be I don't think it would be good for counties. It excludes some things that are not going to be good for counties, and there are some things that we would like excluded. If you take pension and Medicaid, out of the property tax cap. That's going to be very helpful to counties. Some of the things they're talking about excluding are not really helpful. And so we want to look at what the governor's thought is, what the Senate thought is, and how do you reconcile all of those different versions. I don't even know what the Assembly version will look like. But at some point, the counties need to be engaged. And we have offered time and time again to be at the table. New York State Association of Counties, you know, if they would ask, we can tell them how it will work and how we can be partners in making sure that it's successful.
Well, we will see. Of course,
Yeah.
I understand that the mandate relief team is going to be meeting again. This is supposedly not. This is not the final iteration. So we will be.
You've heard more than I have because I didn't know that.
That's what I hear. Well, you know, I heard that from NICOM's Peter Baines, and last night actually, and I'm hoping that we will get some more information about that report because it is a little spotty, and I think a lot of people are unhappy with it.
Well, we submitted 231 ideas from the counties alone, and you can't tell me that there weren't a handful that deserved a place in that report. There might have been one or two that were buried somewhere, but I think there was a probation idea. But you know what? We've got to start taking a look at 2,000 ideas were submitted to that committee. We need to start taking a look at which ones work and which ones are actionable in their present form.
Why do you think that they weren't there? Just in closing, why? I mean, there's been some hypothesis that maybe there are wars going on too many fronts, and to do things like the Triborough Amendment or the Taylor Law would be going too far with the unions who are already potentially at war with the governor over contract negotiations.
Well, I think the diversity around the table made it very challenging to advance any conversation. There was always someone that didn't want a certain, you know, pensions. Okay, we can't talk about that now because certain people didn't want to talk about that. The counties had certain things that, you know, we didn't want to see tackled right away. But I think at the end of the day, it's a complex problem. Mandates, you know, it's been 40 years of history with mandated programs, and you're not going to change that in one report or within the time frame that we had to work with. It's just not going to happen. This is a first step, and I agree with our chairman, Larry Schwartz, that we took a first step. The commitment is there to go further, and we should all be very happy about that. We are talking about things, but it's the complexity that's really kept us in the status quo position for so long, because you get to a certain point and people throw up their hands and say we can't do any more with it. We have to get beyond that point.
Well, hopefully you will, and
I hope so.
It remains to be seen. But I want to thank you very much,
Thank you.
Maggie Brooks, for coming in. It's good to see you.
Good to see
in
you
the
too.
studio.
Thank you. Yes.